Picture shields blocking lines of archers, swords clashing against plate armor, and hand-to-hand combat deciding battles across cities. In 2025, high-tech arsenals vanish overnight. Tanks, jets, and drones are gone. Modern armies, built on advanced technology, suddenly find themselves thrown back to the age of blades and bows. The chaos that follows favors sheer numbers, not firepower, and nations like China and India, with their massive populations, gain a new kind of advantage. We dive into how this shift could reshape global conflicts. Join us to uncover the bloody possibilities and societal toll of this wild what-if world. Now, put yourself in the boots of a modern soldier. You're trained to clear rooms with an M4, coordinate drone strikes, and call in air support. Suddenly, you're handed a sword and shield. No rifle, no night vision, just cold steel. Apart from specialized knife training in units like Navy SEALs or other elite forces, most troops have never touched a weapon like this in their professional lives. The skills they've drilled for years, marksmanship, squad tactics, combined arms maneuvers, don't translate to swinging a blade or holding a shield wall. Swordsmanship and archery, the core of medieval combat, are a whole different world. Using a sword effectively isn't just about swinging hard. It's about balance, timing, footwork, and endurance. It takes years to master the kind of blade control you'd need to survive a real fight. Archery looks simple until you're trying to hit a moving target on a chaotic battlefield, drawing a bowstring again and again while your arms shake from fatigue. Modern compound bows might offer better range and power than medieval longbows, and today's steel could make swords sharper and lighter. But the fundamental problem is skill. Without years of practice, even the best equipment won't save you. Training up an entire military in these techniques isn't a weekend project. It would take 6 to 12 months of intense retraining just to get soldiers to a basic level of competence. That's a long time to stay vulnerable. There's also the psychological shock. Most modern combat happens at a distance. Even in firefights, you rarely see the whites of your enemy's eyes. Now imagine fighting in the press of bodies, feeling every blow, every scream, every ounce of fear. The physical act of stabbing and slashing, the exhaustion from heavy armor, the constant threat of arrows raining down. These are all things most soldiers have never faced. The toll isn't just physical. Rates of PTSD would likely skyrocket, much like what happened in World War I, when soldiers were exposed to relentless, close-quarters violence. The mental strain could break units before the enemy's sword ever did. Even if armies rushed to equip themselves with the best blades and armor modern metallurgy can produce, it wouldn't matter without the skills to use them. The sharpest sword is useless if you can't parry or strike with precision. That's where groups like historical reenactors, HEMA practitioners, and martial arts experts become unexpectedly valuable. Suddenly, these hobbyists are in high demand, training recruits in swordplay, archery, and the tactics that kept medieval armies alive. Shield walls, grappling techniques, and coordinated formations, skills preserved in small communities, would now mean the difference between survival and disaster. But no matter how fast militaries scramble, there's no way to avoid the initial chaos. Armies are built around modern logistics, not medieval retraining camps. The first waves of battles would be brutal, with casualty rates spiking as unprepared soldiers face opponents just as lost as they are. The armies that adapt fastest, that can retrain and reorganize on the fly, will have the best shot at survival. And that's where the size of a nation's population starts to matter more than anything else. When modern superpowers lose their jets, missiles, and digital command centers, the rules of war change overnight. Suddenly, it's not about who has the best tech. It's about who can put the most people on a battlefield and keep them fighting. China and India, each with populations near 1.4 billion, would become the new giants. Historical mobilization rates suggest they could field up to 10% of their population, over 140 million warriors each. Compare that to the US, which, even at full stretch, could mobilize around 33 million. In reality, the current US military has about 1.3 million active duty personnel and maybe 500,000 combat-ready troops. When you stack those numbers up against China's 2 million active soldiers, or the overwhelming potential of mass levies, the gap is impossible to ignore. This isn't just about bodies on the field. It's about how many can be lost and replaced, how quickly armies can be rebuilt, and how long a nation can keep fighting. In a world without drones or satellites, the old rules of logistics come back. Grain stores, horse breeding, and the ability to retool factories for swords and armor become as important as oil refineries and chip plants are today. Countries with deep agricultural bases, think Ukraine, the American Midwest, or India's breadbasket, would have a critical edge in feeding huge armies. Nations with traditions of horse breeding or wide grasslands could rebuild cavalry units, turning horses into the tanks of this new era. The Mongol Empire is a good example of what happens when numbers meet the right tactics. They weren't always the best equipped, but they used coordinated archery from horseback and shock cavalry to smash bigger, slower armies. Modern militaries would have to relearn these techniques from scratch, and the countries with the most people could afford to spend months retraining without putting everything else on hold. China and India could rotate millions through training camps, building up a core of fighters who actually know how to use swords, bows, and shields. Smaller countries would have to make tough choices, either keep fighting with untrained troops or pull back to train, leaving themselves exposed. But it's not all about numbers. Geography and resources matter too. Horses aren't everywhere. If your country has mountains or forests but no grasslands, building a cavalry force is a lot harder. Food is the other big factor. Medieval wars were often won by starvation, not just by swords. If you can't feed your army, it doesn't matter how many you have. Countries with strong agriculture and easy access to supplies could hold out during long campaigns. This could force new alliances. Resource-rich nations like Canada or Australia might partner with China or India, trading grain and horses for protection or manpower. Terrain can flip the script. The English at Agincourt beat a much larger French force by using muddy ground and tight formations of archers. Narrow passes, dense forests, and fortified cities could let smaller armies hold off giants. Even the biggest force is vulnerable if it's forced to attack uphill or squeeze through a bottleneck. So, in this world where tech is gone, the balance of power tilts toward the nations with the most people and the best access to medieval resources. But that doesn't mean the fighting gets any easier. The real challenge comes when old strategies return and the brutality of close combat takes over. Instead of airstrikes and missiles, armies would have to relearn the basics: shield walls, phalanxes, and siege warfare. In a shield wall, each soldier locks a 10 to 15-pound shield with the next, creating a barrier that only works if everyone holds their ground under pressure. Phalanxes mean rows of spears braced against a charge, demanding constant formation drills, something modern troops aren't trained for. Breaking these lines isn't about firepower anymore. It's about getting close, pushing until someone cracks, and accepting that casualties will pile up fast. Every advance or retreat turns into a grind, and the price is measured in bodies. Sieges would become the new normal for urban combat. Cities wouldn't face precision bombings. They'd be surrounded, cut off, and starved out. Imagine a 2025 city with its supply lines severed, defenders trapped inside as attackers use battering rams and flaming arrows to breach the walls. The battle would drag on for weeks or months, with civilians and soldiers rationing scraps as desperation grows. The siege of Constantinople in 1453 is the blueprint. The defenders didn't fall because their walls broke, but because starvation and collapsing morale made resistance impossible. That's what modern cities would face. No airlifts, no relief convoys, just a slow countdown to surrender. Open battles would be just as unforgiving. Terrain would decide who lives and who dies. Armies that hold the high ground, narrow passes, or thick forests could turn a small force into a wall that's almost impossible to break. At Agincourt in 1415, English archers used the mud and trees to their advantage, cutting down French knights with volley after volley of arrows. The lesson isn't just about numbers, it's about using what's around you, setting up ambushes, and forcing bigger armies to fight on your terms. Cavalry would return too. If you have horses and know how to use them, a sudden charge could break a disorganized enemy. But holding these formations takes practice. Modern units would have to learn fast or get wiped out. The human cost would be unlike anything seen in modern wars. Casualty rates in medieval battles often hit 20% to 50% per engagement. That means every fight could wipe out a huge chunk of an army. There's no medevac helicopters or field hospitals. A broken bone or a deep cut could be a death sentence. In sieges, it's not just soldiers who die. Civilians starve, disease spreads, and entire populations can vanish when the walls finally fall. These aren't the distant, sanitized losses of modern warfare. Every loss is up close and personal. All of this would hit soldiers and societies hard. Modern troops are used to fighting at a distance, but in this world, every battle means staring your enemy in the face. The stress and trauma of hand-to-hand combat, of seeing friends fall just feet away, would break morale and mental health on a scale most countries aren't ready for. Endurance, not just firepower, would decide who lasts. Stripped of technology, war turns into a test of grit, numbers, and the will to survive. With every battle leaving scars that go far beyond the battlefield, the way nations fight and what they're willing to endure would never be the same. Shifting to swords and shields isn't just a logistical nightmare. It's a complete reset of how wars are fought and how power is built. Modern armies, optimized for high-tech weaponry, would crumble under the pressure of tactics that demand raw physical endurance and unity. This scenario reveals a truth we often overlook. War is shaped by its tools, and when those tools change, everything else, strategy, alliances, even survival itself, changes with it. So here's the question: does this world prove that sheer numbers will always trump technology? Let us know in the comments which nation you think could retrain fast enough to survive this medieval reset. What epic what-if world would you explore next? Share your ideas below. If you loved this video, smash that like button, subscribe for more mind-blowing alternate histories, and hit the bell. Our next adventure drops soon with another game-changing twist. Catch you in another world of the wildest what-ifs.